Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, February 7th, 2024. Very emphatic in stating as such. Good morning. Many things have happened, and it's time to catch up on some of them. Not necessarily all of them, but we'll give it a shot anyway. Greg Dworkin will be here to help us round things up. So many things happened that I'm already forgetting, like major stories. There's just stories piled on top of stories piled up on stories. Do I want to try and hit them all or just wait? I guess. Well, anyway, listen. The good news is murdery traitor Green sucks at impeachment. That's fantastic. The House did, in fact, after some confusion in discussing this with Joan yesterday, I seriously had no idea that they were planning on bringing the actual impeachment resolution to the floor that day. I thought, although now that I think back on it, I think the Senate was still working on the deal that they're going to kill over immigration and foreign aid, et cetera, et cetera. And so they weren't yet ready to hand it over. But since that what has been the focus for the last couple of days, I figured for some reason I blanked out and thought, all right, well, they've handed that over to the House, and the House is bringing that to the floor at 1:30 yesterday. In fact, they were bringing the impeachment resolution against Mayorkas, and just as we were exiting this show, we kind of realized, okay, well, one, that's what's happening today, and two, there was some issue of whether or not the Republicans were really going to be able to muster a majority for this thing, and guess what? LOL, they have not. They had a couple of votes swing over to the other side. It looks like there were 4 Republican votes against it, but one of them I understand to have been a procedural no. I think Assistant Majority Leader, who I don't even know who the hell the Assistant Majority Leader is for the Republicans anymore, but Steve Scalise was out with his cancer treatment. What are you going to do, right? So somebody else in his place switched their votes so that they could bring it up for reconsideration later. Remember that sometimes happens. You very frequently see it in the Senate. If you vote with the prevailing side, then you can switch your vote. You can essentially say, move for reconsideration. You're entitled to be among the members who can move for reconsideration of the measure so they can bring it back up again. That question did arise yesterday on the social medias. Can they do it again? The answer is yes. There's no real restriction on that. Okay, Greg has got it. Is it Blake Moore of Utah? Really, honestly, these people are nobodies. But they do occupy positions of leadership in the Republican Party, and it doesn't matter because they don't actually lead the Republican Party, which is why they don't make it into the newspapers, which is why we don't read their names frequently enough for me to remember. Donald Trump runs the Republican Party, and there are very few Republican leaders who can, there's not enough sun, right? He blocks the sun for everybody, and of course it turns him orange, and all the foliage underneath, all the undergrowth dies out, which is fine by me. Everything that Trump touches dies, even things that he just shares oxygen with, which is to say that he shares no oxygen with anybody. He sucks it all up, although I guess in the plant world, he sucks up all the carbon dioxide. Maybe we shouldn't be having as much global warming as we're having. But, he sucks at that just as he does with everything else. How about that? Anyway, so yes, 3 Republican no votes plus the reappearance of Al Green, who himself was out for health reasons. And apparently, the headline I saw says Al Green in hospital garb delivers a vote to kill the Mayorkas impeachment. Although the photo of him, maybe it's a file photo because he doesn't look like he's in hospital garb, or unless he's in garb as a doctor on his way to work at the hospital. It could be that. Anyway, that seems exciting. Other exciting news. Right. Donald Trump took a gigantic loss, of course. That was the breaking news that Joan brought us yesterday, as we were on the air, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals was announcing its 3-0 decision against Trump's appeal, or I guess upholding the ruling below on Trump's appeal that, no, really, there is such a thing as total presidential immunity, and I have it, and I have it forever. No, you don't. It was pretty effectively shut down. I haven't read the decision all the way through, but at least one of the reviews of the decision that I've seen noted that in their opinion it was written in such a way that it will likely make the Supreme Court comfortable denying a petition for certiorari. So, we got that going for us, which is nice. Greg's got us covered on all this. We should just let him in the door already. That's been the social media chatter politically. Actually, the other social media chatter is Blue Sky changed its admissions policy, essentially. Yeah, no more legacy admissions to Blue Sky, I guess, is what's happening. The invitation era is over, and it's now open for business to anyone who wants to wander in and make an account. And there's been this big flood of new users, which is great. And except that what ends up happening to Blue Sky when that happens is that most of my Blue Sky feed are people offering helpful advice to new subscribers, new entrants into the Blue Sky universe as if they didn't know what to do, or they're all coming from Twitter. They understand social media. So I have to find my news in between that and people sharing animal pictures, which is pleasant enough. But
that's the basic difference between Blue Sky and Twitter these days.
Yeah.
Because on Twitter, you have to find the news between Bitcoin ads and sex robots.
Well, I guess it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
And that's assuming you block the Nazis.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's what I try to do. I was wondering whether are the pets Nazis on Twitter or no? Okay, they just don't do the pet thing. It's buy Bitcoin and lose all your money that way. All the value of all my invitations, that was the big joke. Oh, they're worthless. They're worth less than my NFTs, but they were worthless a long time ago. We have had a surplus of invitations that we couldn't get rid of for the past 2 months, but now it's just official.
The exchanges are talking about doing something about allowing Bitcoin in some fashion. Somebody called it a gullibility exchange. It's like you have the sentiment from the Michigan Chamber of Commerce or whatever it is. How is consumer sentiment doing now compared to a month ago?
Okay.
But this is going to be a gullibility index. How many gullible people are there this month compared to last month?
I guess so.
Want to buy this stuff?
It's maybe a legitimate economic metric, right? You can't.
Hey, look, if you can make a buck on it, it's legitimate by
definition.
That's
true.
Right?
Yeah, I guess that's true too. I was thinking of as an index. Like you can't blow your money on something that might become worthless in a true, tight, bad economy. You will hang on to that cash instead. The willingness that people have to blow it on speculative idiocy is a pretty good indicator that the economy's not bad.
Yeah, I mean, why don't they just do tulips?
Well, yeah, that too, I guess. I guess that economy was kind of booming. I mean, it was a bad investment and people lost a lot of money. May have turned the economy bad, but it couldn't have been bad to start with if you were putting all your money in flower bulbs.
Well, dot-com bubble and all of that.
Yep.
So we're going to talk about two things mainly today, and that's Congress and the courts.
Right.
What do you want to do first?
Courts.
Courts. Let's do courts. Okay, so let me just give you the quick summary. Travis Akers, who's a Democratic operative.
All right.
A really helpful summary of what happened yesterday in case we forget to do stuff.
Yes, good. That's helpful because there was a lot.
First, RNC Chair Ronna McDaniel resigns.
Yay. It's done?
Trump told her, you can stay, but we're giving you a co-chair who's basically going to babysit you. And she said, thanks, I'm out of here.
A political officer, like in Hunt for Red October.
Exactly right. Federal Appeals Court denies Donald Trump immunity for his role in January 6th. That's what we're going to do. Republican majority House vote fails in attempt to impeach Secretary Mayorkas. We'll do a little of that after, maybe after the break. And then Republican vote to provide aid to Israel fails.
Yes.
Nancy Pelosi turns to the person sitting next to her and said, here's a pro tip for you. You count the votes and then you go to the floor, not the other way around.
Yep. And I don't know how many failures they had to have during the day before they should have guessed that the next thing they brought was going to be a failure too.
Right.
I mean, they did 2 on the same day. You
And
spread
by
it
the
out.
way, Matt Gaetz had an A+ troll and says, the RNC really should hire Kevin McCarthy. He's good at raising money.
Well, yes, he was good at that. He apparently had that skill. I don't know how. But
Yeah, well, they say Steve Scalise is the best vote counter on the Republican side, and Nancy Pelosi just looks at her nails and says, yeah,
yeah, well, that explains
low
it.
bar.
Yeah, no kidding. And he also have to get out of the hospital to count people.
So he'll be in the House probably next week. And so this Mayorkas thing may come up again. The thing is, and everybody's done this, Punchbowl hit them and Playbook hit them and all this stuff they read hit them. And those 2 sites are important because they basically run on Republican sources. And just complete, total debacle, embarrassment. There aren't any words for just how bad it is. Not just 1, but 2 failed votes in a row has everybody questioning whether Mike Johnson is up for the job. Duh. And what the heck is going on. And again, I know very little about the House, and I know less than that about the Senate. I was making a joke that people, in all earnestness, were correcting me on. I said, well, Mike Johnson, maybe instead of impeaching Mayorkas, maybe we should impeach Mike Johnson. Well, you vacate in the House. You don't impeach. I know.
Lordy.
I know. I understand.
Yes.
I do. That much I do know. But vacate was somebody's post, except they said it 35 times until they ran out of space.
Well, it's already
he's in
vacant.
trouble. He cannot function. He can't run this. Nancy Pelosi was able to take a 4-vote majority and make it work. Mm-hmm. By the way, one of the ways she did that is by being all the things that people hated her for.
Yes.
She was a dictator. She wouldn't let amendments. She wouldn't do this. She wouldn't do that. That's because she wanted complete and total control so that when something actually got to the floor, she knew what was going to happen.
Yeah. I mean,
No
it's
surprises.
unpleasant to live
It wasn't
that way,
roll the
but
dice.
so what?
That's what happened yesterday, particularly on the Israel one.
Yeah.
I mean, but with the votes known to be a difficult vote on Mayorkas, why did they bring it to the floor yesterday? Why didn't they just wait till next week?
I don't know. I mean, it may have been that I originally thought, well, maybe Mike Johnson really does just want that one to fail and to go away and to say, look, we tried it your way, right-wing lunatics. I'm a right-wing lunatic. I love you guys, but it just didn't work. Let's do some legislation.
I think his first name is Mike Gallagher, one of the no votes, had said in an interview, look, I told leadership for a month I was going to vote no on this. This was no surprise to them. I don't know what they were thinking.
Unless it, like I said, I mean, it is, I don't know how well it's going to work.
No
but
vote for a month, he said.
Oh, even more clear. Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can think of is saying, well, I'd like, for Murdery Trader Green to be embarrassed, but that can't happen.
Right,
So,
because she's incapable of embarrassment.
Yeah.
I mean, and the thing is that
That's all
Mike
there is to
Johnson
it.
announced she was going to be one of the impeachment managers if and when it ever gets to the Senate, if and when the Senate says, forget it, we're not doing this.
Yeah.
Because, again, I said, I don't have a working knowledge of the House, and I have less than that in the Senate.
Oh.
And the Senate doesn't have to take up a trial. They have, a number of different ways where they could say, yeah, no, thanks.
Well, I think they may, I don't know. The current thinking may be that they're obligated to dispose of it in some
not.
fashion, but
They're not. I
they're
mean,
not,
for
certainly not on the
example,
floor.
here's
They
one
can
example.
absolutely send it to committee and simply say, we just recommend not going forward with this.
Well, that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to look at the actual articles of impeachment. I don't know if you've looked at them or Joan
I
has
have
looked
not.
at them.
No one has.
They're a mess. They're like 17 different things crammed into each one of them. And the
does
Senate
not
can
surprise
look at
me.
this and say, we can't work with this.
That's possible. I mean, I guess, the Senate can do anything it wants, and I guess
Right.
among them would be to say, these guys in the other body have sent us a thing purporting to be articles of impeachment. We have examined them, and they are not. Not that we don't think it rises to the level. It's just they sent us a children's book
Right.
and said it was in articles of impeachment, and it isn't. So
we
we're not
sent
going
your
to do
draft
anything.
back.
Yeah.
Said you really
I mean, I
need
guess
to
you
clean this
can
up.
do that. It's not in the CRS guide to things that you can really do, because ordinarily
Mike Johnson and
you
this
don't think
current
of this.
Republican House are not in the CRS guide of things you should expect to happen.
No, exactly right. You can't just send a telephone book and say it's articles of impeachment.
Yeah. So, there's that.
All
But
right.
Then, on top of that, having lost the Mayorkas vote, to not know whether or not you have enough votes to provide aid to Israel. And then you take
that's
that to the
ordinarily
floor and you
easy to
fail
count.
on that back to back,
Yeah,
you look like idiots.
you do.
And again, one may argue,
I'm
voters
gonna
don't
start
pay
doing
attention
this.
to this stuff and they won't even know. But the press does. They are all over this. And the press given to the Republicans is so bad that you could find we have to do both sides, find ways of saying, well, Democrats are in disarray because they're not completely united behind Biden. Well, there was actually a couple of primaries that we've had so far, maybe 3 if you actually count the unofficial one in New Hampshire. And Biden's doing just fine.
Yeah, he didn't lose any of those.
He didn't lose
So
to
there you
none
go.
of the above like Nikki Haley did yesterday.
Right. That was a
wasn't
good one.
included on the list that I gave you from Travis Akers, but it could have been.
Yes, it was on my list of, if we needed to laugh for a minute at Nikki Haley, that's possible. Nevada had primaries, and they're going to do something
Nevada
else.
had primaries, but they don't count because they're not going to award delegates.
They don't-
Instead, they're going to
they had
have a
it, but they didn't
caucus,
count.
which is going to be
What?
an anointment for Trump. So Nikki Haley said, well, I'm not going to play, but I'll have my name on the ballot.
I don't.
So she did, and she
Understand.
lost to none of the above.
Yeah, that's not terrific. Except for none of the above, who feels great.
Now, there was a none of the above on the Democratic side, too, and that beat
What do you
out Marian Anderson,
Well, that was
or
not surprising.
Marian
anybody.
Williamson, rather.
Oh, well, Marian Anderson as well.
Yeah,
Who's
no,
not
Marian
even-
Anderson's
didn't
great.
get any
Marian
votes.
Williamson, not so great, and she finished third, just like Dean Phillips did, finishing third to her. So, I don't understand why these other people are in the race at all. Dean Phillips was not in Nevada because reasons.
Oh, okay.
He wasn't on the ballot.
All right. Sure. Yeah, there's a very strange situation happening with the primaries and the caucus thing. And I got an article about it. Nevada did something a couple of years ago. I don't remember
Nobody
it.
understands it, but the important thing is nobody threw any chairs.
Oh yeah, right. That was memorable as well. Yeah, there was something apparently stemming from a previous Democratic Party fight about nominating their delegates, and the courts allowing both methodologies to be used in a single year, and then something. The Republicans
and
now
then
said we'll do
everybody's
it
on
too.
John Ralston's case saying you have to write an article saying we didn't matter.
I guess. Whatever. I don't know. I'm gonna try and sort that out. There are some articles that explain it. I guess it's not that complicated. It's just dumb and weird. But hey,
Hey,
people
and listen,
love Las
while you're looking at
Vegas.
that article, take a look at the articles of impeachment too, because
Sure.
they're pretty funky.
Right. I
So
only
anyway,
read it for
let's
the
talk
articles.
about the courts. This is the big news for all of the dysfunction in Congress.
Right.
The courts are the big news, and
The
it's
big
hard
news.
to summarize everything because it's just so detailed and important. So I'm going to rely on super lawyer Randall Eliason, who has a great summary on his Substack called
Super
Sidebars.
Wow.
Appeals court rejects Trump immunity claims. And he
Yes,
says,
I do
this
too.
paragraph represents the heart of the court's opinion. At bottom, former President Trump's stance would collapse our system of separated powers by placing the president beyond the reach of all 3 branches. Presidential immunity against federal indictment would mean that, as to the president, Congress can't legislate, executive can't prosecute, and the judiciary can't review. We, the appellate court, the circuit court, cannot accept that the office of the presidency places its former occupants above the law for all time thereafter.
Why not?
So Eliason says, look, Trump was expected to lose, but the strength and the unanimity of the court's opinion is a welcome result that substantially increases the likelihood his D.C. prosecution will go to trial before the 2024 election. Why? Because it's so good, it's so strong, and it was a per curiam decision, meaning it was authored by all 3 judges, and that's significant, and he talks about why. It's solid, it's compelling, it's thorough, and it raises the chances that the Supreme Court will take a look at this and say, we're not touching this. We don't have to. It's been done.
Yeah, and they never have to, but there's really no reasons. There's certainly no circuit split, and if there's a fairly substantial circuit court opinion that states just where they would come down anyway, they just say,
or if
that.
it was a 2-1, which is the importance of the doing it together.
Yes.
So they're taking away every excuse that the Supreme Court would have to look at it by even dealing with some of the major arguments, even arguments that the two sides didn't make. That's where Midland asphalt.
Oh, I see. Oh, yes, of course. I mean,
Midland asphalt. Everybody knows
true.
Midland asphalt. I looked at that and said, "Is that the same thing as Four Seasons landscaping?"
A little bit. There are some wacky cases out there.
So basically, it's a question of whether or not there's jurisdiction. Do you have a right to really bring this case in the first place? Is this something we should be looking at? And the court took 10 pages to say, you know what? It's a reasonable question. We looked at it, and yeah, we do. So don't even try that one.
Okay.
We've already settled it. And there's a case called Midland Asphalt, which deals with that, and we think it doesn't apply here. So let's move on and look at the merits. And on the merits, Trump has a terrible argument. We'll cover each and every one of them. And no matter what the Supreme Court wants to come up with, we've already discussed it in length, in detail, with footnotes. And, you don't have to. You don't have to take this. So to put this in perspective, there's a wonderful article in The New Yorker that I came across by E. Tammy Kim called The Ghost of Bush v. Gore Haunts the Supreme Court's Colorado Case.
Oh, boo.
Separate.
That's haunting.
Because the Colorado stuff is coming up Thursday.
Tomorrow, yeah.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
10 o'clock.
Oh, I'm busy.
They're going to have the oral arguments, and you get to hear them. You can't see them because the Supreme Court won't allow cameras.
You can't listen because you're here.
But the relevance of Bush v. Gore to both Colorado and, in some sense, a little bit more tangential to the immunity case is important. And why? Because, let me just give you this piece from The New Yorker. In early December 2000, a young lawyer in Washington, D.C. named Gerard Maglioka stopped in front of the Supreme Court building. The question of who had won the presidential election remained unresolved. Bush and Gore were separated by hundreds of votes in Florida. And you may remember the outcome here. It was a 5-4 decision. And so many people said, well, George W. Bush won the presidency by 1 vote.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The Bush campaign had sued to stop a recount. An important point to remind people, the Supreme Court is not hall monitor. They don't step in unless somebody asks them to.
Right.
That's going to be relevant in regard to this immunity thing.
Okay.
Do they have to do something? Somebody has to ask them.
Right. Well,
right. If you don't ask them, they don't have to do anything. So the circuit court, the appellate court said, you know what? We're going to set it up this way. If you don't appeal to the Supreme Court our decision that you don't have immunity by Monday, then Judge Chutkan can go ahead and do a trial.
Okay.
And if you say, okay, well, I want to appeal en banc to the whole entire group, not just this panel of 3 in the D.C. Circuit, then we're telling you we're still going to let Judge Chutkan do the trial, so that won't help you delay.
Okay.
And by the way, we may not even give you that. In fact, we probably won't, because this has been so well argued, like not only the Supreme Court, but our own larger D.C. Circuit doesn't need to do this. We already did it.
Yes. Okay.
So basically they're telling Trump, if you want to delay, you're going to have to apply directly to the Supreme Court. That's where this whole idea of, well, what will the Supreme Court do? Back in 2000, a lot of people expected the Supreme Court not even to touch the Bush v. Gore thing because it was a state court issue. Yes. And as a matter of fact, the Supreme Court decided twice.
Yes, they did.
There was an original, a suggestion that the Supreme Court intervene, and the Supreme Court in that one said, well, we're sending it back to the state for review. And then when the state said, well, we're going to allow recounts in various counties, the Supreme Court said, okay, we'll take the case.
Yes.
And then they decided that Bush won by one vote, 5-4. So at the time, there were a lot of lawyers, like this young conservative lawyer, who said, I don't even think they're going to take the case. So what the New Yorker says about that is he was a second-year associate at the white shoe firm Covington and Burling. He was a Republican who graduated from Yale Law School, clerk for Second Circuit Judge Guido Calabrese. Election law was narrow, concerned with voting rights, campaign finance, redistricting, and Bush v. Gore was unprecedented. And at the time, everybody said this is a question about who won Florida. Elections are decided by the state Supreme Court. Why would the U.S. Supreme Court even get involved? They don't have jurisdiction.
Yeah, independent state.
And of course, all of that turned out to be wrong, but that was the thinking at the time.
Yes. That was where we began to realize that you could be pre-wrong about things.
Yes, but also that the Supreme Court was going to decide things based on how they wanted to decide them. And the article also talks about how that wrecked the court and people got mad at each other and it was never the same after. All of that's true. But the point I'm trying to make is that the Supreme Court is not, and at that time was not obligated to take this stuff up. They had to. There had to be a really good reason for it. Now, in the case of Trump versus Colorado, Trump versus the Secretary of State there, you could argue that there's a reason to bring it up. And yet, the whole point is that whereas, this was an issue at the time, the Supreme Court decided to weigh in. Maybe they made the wrong decision. Maybe they'll rethink it. Maybe it's a lesson they can learn.
Maybe. I mean, I doubt it. Or it's a door open to
well, they
up
might
things
do it
again,
with immunity. They'll take it up with Colorado because they feel like they have to.
Okay. Well, I don't know. They probably won't touch the immunity thing. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support.
Declare that Bush was the winner. They declared that this belongs in the state.
They did declare that. Hello, everybody. We're back, and you're back in the middle of our conversation as well.
Well, it's a question of
Bush
what
v. Gore.
did the Supreme Court actually do in 2000.
They did several things.
Here's the description from the New Yorker.
Okay.
An often forgotten detail from 2000 is that the Supreme Court actually considered the Florida recount twice.
They did.
After election night, teams of lawyers for both campaigns descended on Tallahassee and traded lawsuits. Gore demanded recounts in various counties. Bush, who had the apparent lead, wanted the election certified statewide. The Florida Supreme Court agreed with Gore.
Right.
Go do recounts.
Yes.
And the Supreme Court had a question, an emergency appeal based on the fact that, you got to decide the election now. And Bush said, we don't like that decision. And the Supreme Court said, unanimously, when Bush petition came in, a clerk read it to Justice Stevens, who was, I guess, in charge. And the Supreme Court said, you know what? Unanimously, we're sending the case back to the Florida Supreme Court. We're saying the Supreme Court has to decide this in Florida, the Florida Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. It's a state issue.
Yes. Well,
then the Florida Supreme Court decided in favor of Gore again. And that's when the Supreme Court took it up and said, okay, this time we're taking it.
Yeah. Well, I think, as I recall, I'd have to refresh my memory about it, but there were two different, well, what the Supreme Court wanted everybody to think were two separate questions presented. The first one being, do we need to, is there still time to contest this thing, and
or do we have to force the state to certify? Supreme Court said we still have time.
Right. They invented or reiterated their safe harbor doctrine. You have until X date to straighten this out, so there's still time for you to work on this. And then by the time it came back the second time, the Supreme Court viewed it as...
The Florida Supreme Court says, okay, manual route routes across the state, and Bush's team says that's an unconstitutional overreach. And Bush asked the U.S. Supreme Court for an immediate stay. This is going to be important. A freeze of the recount.
Right.
And the conservatives said, okay.
Yes.
They granted the stay. That's what made it remarkable. And that's what people said would never happen because it's a state issue.
Yes. Although I think the court arguing for itself said, well, what we don't want is we can't have a statewide recount conducted under different conditions in each county, and we don't like the way Florida has decided to go ahead with conducting the recount that we otherwise thought there was time to do. Now,
and we're not going to let them finish it.
We won't let them do it. Yeah,
we're just going to tell them, no, there's a stay.
And they just happen to have stopped. We're going to stop the wheel turning here, or not allow it to start spinning again. It just so happens we're stopping it at a point where our preferred outcome is indicated. But
so then they had oral arguments on December 11th, and on December 12th, the court issued a 5-4. Bush won.
Yeah,
I mean,
they needed by the 14th.
So the whole thing here is that the Supreme Court decided, we are going to intervene, and we're going to intervene in a state election, and we're going to tell the state that you can't even do recounts until we decide, what's going on here. So we're going to issue this stay. It was as remarkable and as shocking to liberals as when the Supreme Court issues a stay supporting somebody like Matt Kaczmarek until, such time as we actually have a chance to look at stuff. Because when you issue a stay in this setting, you're telegraphing how you're going to decide. Why is that important? It's important for a lot of reasons, but the main reason it's important here is because that Monday deadline that Trump has to appeal to the Supreme Court, the decision that he doesn't have blanket immunity, what is the Supreme Court going to do? They can decide not to take the case. That would be smart based on all the fallout from 2000 that we're talking about. Mm-hmm. They could decide that, okay, you have to put in a cert petition, and that could take forever, and they could run the clock out until like 2029 if they feel like it. They could basically say, we don't have time for it this term. We can do it next term. Or they could issue a stay.
A stay of the D.C. Circuit?
And Chutkan can't go ahead and do a trial.
Well,
that's the important part here. What we need the Supreme Court to do, as Armando has pointed out, is not issue a stay, which is what they did in 2000 that screwed everything up. Mm-hmm. We need to have them not issue a stay, and then they can take their time, as Armando puts it, of writing their own flowery little, decisions and opinions, and who cares how long that takes? As long as there's not a stay, Chutkan can do her trial. That's what's at stake here.
That is true. Well, it would be a bigger surprise, I think, to see a stay in this case, only because...
That's what we're watching for. That's what I'm saying.
In Florida...
And it's based on what happened in 2000.
Yeah. Though at least in Florida, there was like, well, I don't know, this is novel and weird and strange, and there are twists and turns, and you do have, something of a legitimate point. Well, shouldn't all the recounts be conducted in the same way? Well, they can't be because not every county voted using the same mechanism, and so that's bad. It's probably not a great thing. I don't know. We're not going to be able to settle this by December 14th.
And they're doing a recount, and we have to decide now. Now, that kind of pressure isn't here with the immunity decision. Nonetheless, there were plenty of lessons the court could learn if they felt like it about intervening when they didn't have to intervene.
Yeah,
and we'll see if they learned any of it.
The reason I think it would be more surprising anyway this time is there isn't any inherent controversy. There aren't competing schools of actual real legal scholars who have ever recognized anything like, oh yeah, presidents, sure, absolute immunity from everything forever, even when they're not president. It's not a thing. I mean, that's just a wish casting thing.
Yeah, that's what Bill Clinton had. Oh wait, he didn't.
Right. There's nothing that's ever approached anything like that. And everybody who's, even aspired or once thought about going to law school but never went knows the thing you repeat over and over again ad nauseum in every situation is that no one is above the law. So now I present to you 250 years later the question of, is somebody above the law? No, they're not, and it's embarrassing to entertain the idea, so we're just not going to do it. There won't be any stay because there's no other side for us to examine and balance the equities. No one has ever said that, except Nixon, who said when the president does it, that means it's not illegal. But he never said it's also not illegal if I do it when I'm not president, but I once was, which is surprising that an adult would say such a thing. And I don't know, but we're all stuck in this mode of thinking, like, we forget, some of these justices are completely insane, or they'll do whatever it takes to make it look like their side won. Are there 5 of them though? Well, there's 4, and that might be enough to get you a stay, but I don't know. Maybe there's 3. And 1 or 2 people who, well, all right, if we have some arguments and you give me something to latch onto, but absent the argument, no, I can't help. It would be very surprising. Whereas, at least in the Bush v. Gore case, they were saying, I don't know, there's a lot of complicated crap going on here. There's a decent argument on both sides. No.
Do I have it right? You need 4 to accept a cert petition and 5 to get a stay?
I don't know. Offhand. That might be right.
I read that somewhere.
Okay.
I don't know.
Well, that's good reading. If you read it and those words said those things, I'll believe it.
If I remember it right, that's the issue.
It makes some sense.
But the thing is watching for the stay, and if the stay comes, then we're screwed.
Okay.
Then
yes.
Chutkin's never going to have this trial before the election.
Yeah, and if there's 5 votes for a stay, we do have some problems. Yeah. Yes. Looks like the quick Google does come up with that one. It's so I think 4 will get you a look for cert, but I guess if they're going to actually intervene substantively without yet hearing arguments or considering the case, it's a higher threshold if you really want to step in substantively with a stay. You're going to have to show that there's a fairly decent chance of succeeding on the merits, and that would be fine.
Right. That's why a stay is so important, because the stay would be telegraphing, hey,
it doesn't always
the bad
mean
side is going to win.
But it means that there's at least a majority who was willing to entertain siding with you. They may be convinced otherwise by the time the decision comes around.
Well, that's pretending the Supreme Court does things based strictly on the merit, or strictly based on the original text. If that were the case, then Trump loses Colorado, because that's been pretty clearly laid out, not just in the law, but by history.
Yes. Womp womp. Too bad. Thankfully, we don't read that. The originalists don't care about that.
So in other words, the Supreme Court's going to do what they're going to do, and that's why everybody's watching it. I'm not predicting what they're going to do. But again, going back to what this circuit court did,
yes,
they did such a good job. They did it per curiam. They wrote it out so clearly. They even addressed issues that hadn't been brought up by the plaintiffs. And so the Supreme Court has every reason simply not to touch this, and that's what they should do.
Yes. Well, that used to be the preferred mode of operation for most Supreme Courts, that if they did a minimalist thing, if they don't have to touch it, we shouldn't, because crazy things can happen when you do. You think you're straightening things out, but usually, as it turns out, in the law and everything else, the law of unintended consequences, which is not one of the laws they're supposed to interpret.
So this morning, there's a new poll out, PBS, NPR, Marist, and it says Trump should not get immunity. 2 out of 3 Americans say.
Yeah, well, 3 out of 3 Americans who counted said they agreed. That's the D.C. Circuit.
Yeah. 2/3 of U.S. adults do not think former President Donald Trump should have immunity from criminal prosecution for actions he took while president, according to PBS NewsHour NPR Marist poll. The majority of Americans are aligned with a new federal appeals court ruling that found Trump can stand trial on charges tied to a plot to overturn the 2020 presidential election. And remember, for civilians like me who aren't lawyers, the appeals court is the circuit court.
Yes.
The appellate court, they're all the same.
Yes, appellate courts is just anybody who reviews decisions made at trial.
Well, this was an appeal.
Yeah.
This was an interlocutory appeal, which is to say, asking for it before trial.
That's true. That's right. They're still reviewing a decision made in the trial court, just not during a trial.
See all the things you've taught me over the years?
Yeah, it's all very easy, very simple. Okay. We have, those are our appellate courts. The circuit courts in the federal system, and then, and the Supreme Court is an appellate court too.
Right. So, 65% of independents, which is the important part of the poll, think Trump should not be insulated from accountability for actions he took while president. He was indicted by a grand jury in August over alleged efforts that threatened the peaceful transfer of power leading up to the January 6th riot.
Yeah, that
But if Trump should not be insulated from accountability for actions he took while president, if that's true,
it is.
That means that the New York Alvin Bragg hush money case, which partly took place while Trump was president, should go forward.
Well, sure it should. It has been.
And he's going to.
Okay.
And whereas Chutkan is being very careful and saying, I'm going to wait for the Supreme Court to tell me what to do, Alvin Bragg may just say, this is a state issue, and they don't really have jurisdiction here, and I'm just going to go ahead with it, and, let's play Mike Johnson and roll the dice and see what happens.
I guess. Yeah, I don't know. He may have a better idea of what's going to happen.
Or by the time that case may come, the Supreme Court may not take the case, and it may be clear.
Right. Yeah, and he's got a little more latitude in it with, the type of offense they're trying, and the fact that he wants to do it as a state law issue. Okay. I mean, I guess go ahead. There's certainly no ruling standing in his way right now.
The law is an ass, said Dickens, but, it's also complicated. There's state law, there's federal law, there's this case, which isn't exactly that case. That's why you have lawyers, and, you got to argue all this stuff. But the fact of the matter is, the reality is that between now and the election, this legal stuff is going to be more and more salient, more relevant. Yes. And that being the case, that's one of the reasons why one of the many reasons why you shouldn't pay too much attention to polls right now. At least the head-to-head
I guess that's true too.
Horse race polls. One's about whether or not is Trump a crook, and if he is a crook, should he be shielded from being a crook? Those are important.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But the horse race stuff, you can set aside and say, look, basically the polls all say that it's kind of a tie. So especially if you're looking at likely voters and what the heck is a likely voter in February of an election year, why don't we wait until right before the election for deciding those things?
Yes.
And that's fine.
You can't even decide
I think this legal stuff takes precedent, and that's why we did so much of the show today on this.
That is,
and not the dysfunction in the House, which is also equally important.
Yeah, well, that's so much easier to explain. They had a vote and lost. Ha ha ha! LOL. You're not supposed to. Oh yeah, right. So twice the time we've just spent
Nancy
on
Pelosi said, "I told them to count." They didn't listen to me. I was sitting next to Mike Johnson and said, "You should count the votes before you put it on the floor." He didn't listen to me, and then he did it again.
I mean, that is funny, but I do hope that she did not say that to him. But
men don't ask for directions. It's terrible.
That could be it. But no free advice, please, Nancy. That's after the fact. You can laugh at him, and you run the risk that he'll read your advice later. But don't help.
Yeah,
I'm sure she didn't. I'm sure she did not say anything to him. And
I'm just making it up. But boy, she must have been thinking this.
Yeah. Sure.
Just like Joe Biden didn't actually say on TV yesterday, this immunity decision by the circuit court, by the appeals court, is a BFD.
True.
He didn't say that, but I'll bet he was thinking it.
Yeah, it might have been fun. I mean, this is a weird election, and it might do him good, but yeah, he's old school. He's not going to completely. Yeah, he should have been on there, like in your face, you suck, loser. Right. I mean, Trump would have, but it may not be the example you want to follow.
So Anthony Michael Crease, the law professor from Georgia, who I follow, said, look, this circuit court thing was a complicated, multifaceted issue that required thorough analysis. It took a while, but worth it, which is more likely to be allowed to stand by the Supreme Court than not. It also has important influence on proceedings in Georgia. A job well done is better than a job done.
Okay, true.
So he's not unhappy it took this long if it were this thorough.
Yes. Right. There was some concern about how long it was taking to get this thing announced and published, but I guess it was worth the wait.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So we know that Mike Johnson and the hapless Republican House can't get their stuff together and they can't pass things.
Mm-hmm.
One thing they can do is block things. So they said, well, we don't like the idea of actually addressing what we call a crisis on the border. We won't allow the Senate to send us a bill. We won't vote for it. We won't even allow a vote on it.
Oh, no.
And so, what are you going to do with that Senate? So the Senate Republicans looked at each other and said, the politics of this in our party, with Trump pushing us to not do anything, is to not do anything. And Jim Lankford, the negotiator for the Republicans, the earnest conservative who tried to get all the conservative stuff that conservatives have been asking for like 10 years into this bill and did.
Yeah, like he's a negotiator.
Was thrown under the bus, and he said, I feel like the guy who's standing out in the field with the metal stick during a thunderstorm.
Yeah, that's another way of putting the same thing. I mean, the bus.
He also said, I feel like the bus not only ran over me, it then backed up a couple of times.
Yes. Well, yeah.
But that's not the end of the story.
Oh, all right.
So the Republicans reneged on everything.
Yeah.
They basically exposed themselves for do nothing, which is what Biden did get on TV to talk about.
Yes.
And Schumer said, okay, fine. You were the ones who said Ukraine, Israel, and area, in that part of the world needs to be funded. You're the ones that said it had to be married to the border bill. You wouldn't just give us the money for Ukraine and Israel and Taiwan and countering China and such.
Mm-hmm. That doesn't.
You wouldn't do that. So we put the border bill together because that's what you said you wanted. We gave it to you, and then you said, no, we don't want that. Okay, fine. We're going to put support for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan and opposing China in a separate standalone bill, and we'll put it on the floor as soon as this afternoon. Now, this is what I mean about I don't understand the Senate even less than I understand the House. I don't know how it's so difficult to get a bill to the floor, and then Schumer can say, okay, well, we're just going to do this like in a couple hours. Mm-hmm. But he's essentially separating the support for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan from this border bill. He's going to put the whole thing on the floor. It'll fail, and then he's going to bring up Israel, Ukraine, et cetera, separately later this afternoon or this evening. And so there's some legal procedure that allows him to do that. I don't know it. I don't understand it. I don't have to. I'm just telling you that this is apparently not only what's going to happen, but McConnell, Grassley, and other Republicans say, okay, that's a good idea.
Hmm.
We might vote for this. We might not filibuster it.
Oh, okay.
And so if that's the case, you step back and say, well, what did the Republican – we're talking about the incompetent and, you don't have it together Republicans in the House. What did the Republicans in the Senate do? They're the ones that wanted to do these two bills together and wouldn't fund Ukraine on its own. And now they're going to go back and say, okay, that plan you had like a couple of months ago? It was okay. It's better than what we have. Let's do that. And so I'm not saying Democrats planned this. They did not. But they may well have lucked out because a lot of Democrats didn't want this border stuff.
Yes.
And they did want to fund Ukraine.
Yes.
And that may be what they get.
Okay. You know, I think I'd be all right with that.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. And I can't tell you, oh, well, that was the plan. It was not the plan.
You can never tell what the plan was, but they may have thought, well, it could come out that way, but there's no sense in betting on it. That's not a good idea. But maybe it'll work out, and but you have to be willing to live with the
Ukraine
consequences.
funding, which is vital, we think, is to do this with the border together. Okay, there's going to be a lot of people that don't like it,
yes.
But that's what happens when you compromise. Fine,
right.
We'll do it.
If you're willing to do that, then later. Okay.
And no, you don't want that? Okay, well, we'll go back to the original plan. Just give us what we wanted in the first place.
And I think they got to that point by saying, okay, well, you know how the compromise game works. We might end up looking bad here. But there might be some chance that the Republicans are so crazy that they blow it up, and then we just get the part we want.
Well, this is why I always say you can't have policy without politics.
That is true. Right, you have to choose the people that are going to make the policy, and they have to practice politics once they get there. Should we risk this? If the worst thing happens and the whole thing passes, can we live with the immigration part?
So, again, the difference between the Republicans in the Senate, who are increasingly looking like the Republicans in the House, and the Republicans in the House, is that the Republicans in the Senate are complicated, convoluted, tied up in knots. Eventually, sometimes they actually get stuff done, even if it's by the back door. Whereas the House Republicans are just completely, totally dysfunctional, have no clue, don't know what they're doing, and don't know what they're going to do tomorrow.
Right. Except they know that it'll fail. Whatever they're going to do, they won't be able to do.
Well, the thing is they think it'll succeed, and then they're going to fail. That's why Mike Johnson is just like way in over his head. These two votes should never have gotten to the floor. Oh, and for those of you who are longtime listeners, why is this happening? Because Kevin McCarthy gave away the Rules Committee.
Yes, that is true. And a reason why all of these things are happening, also for your longer-term listeners, know that these guys don't know how to govern and don't know how to tell the difference between something that's popular among their online bubble or the real populace of the United States, and they are the vast majority of the Republican conference in the House because they're candidates in a box. They were mailed a box full of talking points to say. They were increasingly culled from Nazi Twitter and the weirdo dark web, and people don't know what the F they're talking about, but it works for their districts. And then they get there and try to govern the rest of the country, and the country says, we don't know what you're talking about.
But it's worse than that, because like in the old days with the candidate in a box, at least there was a guy writing the script, Gingrich and others, and they could pass a messaging bill. These guys can't even pass a messaging bill.
Right, and that's, largely, I guess, because as wacky as Gingrich was, he had a national strategy in mind, and he was grounded in actual events. He watched the news and formulated policy, poorly, based on that, whereas now policy is formed based on what does this YouTuber I like say in his car. He says there's litter boxes in the school. We got to have a messaging bill. It's going to have to be about litter boxes and Jewish space lasers. And I believe Florida now legislating on cocaine bears, which I guess they saw on Netflix and thought it was a documentary. And they're going to... It's actually true. A Republican legislature, obviously, in Florida said we need to change the law because bears on crack are killing Americans left and right. And do you know that the EPA will arrest you if you shoot a cocaine bear that's attacking your family? That's outrageous. Well, it's not existent. But, the box that these guys are getting is becoming dumber. Not necessarily just the politicians, though you have to be a dumber one to accept delivery of this box. You're right. The quality of the shipments in the box has gone downhill.
Yeah, they made the box smaller and started to charge more money for it, and people are not happy with that.
Like cereal, but now they're putting
Well, now the
rat
box is
poison
empty.
in it. And yeah, maybe it would have been better empty. But yeah, and then also just a change in the way that Republicans have chosen who they're sending to the Senate too. It wasn't always the case that they
I am
promoted
reminded,
House members.
Again, because I'm old.
Oh.
And I can't, off the top of my head, say, oh, here are some Senate leaders I really admired that were Republicans.
Wow.
I can't. But I will give you Howard Baker. In the era
right.
of Richard Nixon, what did the president know and when did he know it, and was willing to at least listen when there was evidence in his face? And he probably tanked his chances of ever becoming president because of it, but, went with the flow anyway.
Yep.
And do we have that now? No, we do not. We have Mike Johnson.
We don't. And right at the top of the show where we're saying not only can you not name somebody who's a moderate, leadership mold Republican in the Senate side, it's harder to name any of them at all because they're confined to their box because Trump keeps them there. They, they maybe are getting. But maybe the box that they're receiving is coming from the Trump campaign, but Trump doesn't allow for anybody else to be a leader, so we don't even know the names of these guys.
We have a list of so-called moderates. We have Stefanik, we have Mace, we have any New York Republican. These are all people who voted for Mayorkas' impeachment.
True.
For no reason, because there's no grounds, as Mike Gallagher told his colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing this as a stunt, and there's no grounds for it. Well, but what's your point? Yeah.
Well, they were interesting. They were exercising the Gerald Ford rule, although Gerald Ford's rule supposedly had a warning involved in it as well. Impeachment is whatever the House says it is, so be careful what you say, House. And everybody, I don't know, that was supposed to be understood. And I can't believe we're pointing to Gerald Ford as the voice of wisdom, but that's where we are these days. I mean, he never thought there were litter boxes in schools.
So
we've never been able to convince him of that.
You know what's coming next?
Once he
the
fell
Supreme
into
Court's going to hear oral arguments on the former president's ballot eligibility, and as Rolling Stone points out, what do the Republicans do in response? Republicans are going to declare in a resolution that Trump isn't an insurrectionist because they say so.
Oh, well, that is one of the things
Sponsored by
that they
Matt
can
Gaetz
say.
and Elise Stefanik.
All right. Well, maybe time for, defeat the previous question, first of all. And then, I've been thinking, why not offer an amendment or a resolution from Democrats declaring that his disability under the 14th Amendment has been removed by the Congress and then vote against it. And then when it doesn't get 2/3, you say, oh, you must actually be disqualified then. Try that one. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I now realize, okay, I probably didn't put aside the cocaine bear thing. And by the way, it was crack bears in particular. But it's a real thing. And now I have to write a note for the production staff on finding but I think I must have whatever the hell we call it, skeeted it on Blue Sky at some point when I saw the thing. But wow, I don't know. Now but I realize now, okay, well, you can't just blurt that out with no proof whatsoever. But I'm gonna have to scroll back a day or two to find this thing. But I assure you that it actually was circulated online. I cannot assure you that it's absolutely positively true and that they're really doing it, but I can promise you that I saw someone say that it was true, and I know that doesn't sound very good, but the someone that I saw, here we are. The someone that I saw was, here we go, another of my adjunct production staff, my mom, has sent me this one. Let's see if it's the same. Yeah, I think it is. It was The Guardian that printed it, and you can pretty much trust that they adhere mostly to journalistic standards, right? But I saw it circulated by Phil Lewis, who is also ubiquitous on Blue Sky. senior editor at HuffPost, and frequently the breaking news guy that we all know and trust. But you don't have to listen to Phil. He was handing us The Guardian, and The Guardian says it's real. And do we believe The Guardian? I do. Richard Luscombe reporting from Miami on this one. Florida lawmaker says bill to loosen rules on killing bears. Sounds, questionable, right? Well, he says it's aimed at the ones that are on crack, which is not bears so much as it is Florida legislators. But I digress. Or do I? Well, anyway, no evidence backs up Jason Schoaf's claims that bears on crack are breaking into homes, and opponents say the bill will allow people to kill bears without any threats. That is to say that the bears pose no threat, and it's really all about bear hatred, I guess, and they're going to go, well, I don't know what's motivating it, but Jason Schoaf, spelled like loaf with an SH, for some reason, is the guy behind this. I'm serious. I'm going to have to read you the article so you still don't think I made this up. A Florida lawmaker is seeking looser regulations on the killing of wildlife, or a guy who, all right, I inserted a word in there. Florida lawmaker seeking looser regulations on the killing of wildlife. A gun guy who likes to hunt or whatever, right? Has claimed that black bears high on crack are breaking into people's homes and, quote, tearing them apart. I assume, I don't know whether they're tearing the homes apart, yes, or the people. I'm not sure. But the bears are definitely on crack. That is happening. Bears are cooking their cocaine into crack and smoking it in glass pipes. No opposable thumbs, but do you really need one? And if you smoke enough, you think you have an opposable thumb, and it just cascades from there, I'm sure. Are they eating it? I don't know. Why are Floridians? Don't feed crack to the bears. The sign. Don't make me tap the sign, everybody. The allegation from Republican state congressman, which is not really the terminology I would prefer to see used there, but state legislator Jason Schoaf, and now I find myself compelled to Google Jason Schoaf, and most of the hits will be about cocaine bears, I am sure. Oh my God, he's in disguise. Sometimes he's bearded and sometimes he's not. But yes, an actual person allegedly in the Florida House of Representatives representing Florida House District 7, Port St. Joe, Florida, I guess would be his home base there. So, all right. He actually exists, in case you had doubts about that. So Schoaf, whose biography reveals a passion for hunting and crack, is bizarre even by the already unorthodox standards of Florida, which in recent times has boasted cocaine sharks and, I missed this one. Well, actually, I missed cocaine sharks as well. Marauding herpes-ridden monkeys. That is actually the Florida State Senate that he's talking about. So I don't know if that really counts. But, kudos to Florida for giving voting rights to monkeys. We're talking about the ones that are on crack, of which there aren't any. And they break your door down. And really, why even bother using a door? A bear on crack should just tear through the siding of your home and come in any way it wants, honestly. And they're standing in your living room growling and tearing your house apart, which really sounds like, honestly, like Jason Schoaf is on crack and he thought he saw a bear in his living room, when in fact it was, the police coming to arrest him for drug possession, possibly a member of his family saying, I don't like that you're smoking crack in our living room and you should be more responsible. You're a state legislator. I don't know. I'm not sure what the kernel of truth is behind the idea that bears are breaking into homes through doors, because they're educated bears. Remember, they had to have enough basic chemistry skills to make the crack. And now they're in the house and they're tearing it apart, which is the real downer here. Like, I just straightened this place up and now I'm going to have to shoot you. Well, This was the claim that Schoaf told a meeting of the Florida Legislature's House Infrastructure Strategies Committee discussing his House Bill 87, which, by the way, the craziest thing in this whole story, believe it or not, is that this bill about shooting crack bears got referred to the Infrastructure Strategies Committee. You tell me what's happening here. It's well, it's really a bill about what's happening to Florida's doors. And I believe the cocaine bears are responsible for this, and that's how we got this. But I just wanted to have tax credits for Floridians to replace their destroyed doors. That's the route I took to the Infrastructure Strategies Committee. I don't know how this happened. House Bill 87 apparently would remove most penalties for killing bears without authorization, which I assume there are some, right? When you run into one of these crack bears, he starts out. I mean, this is now the quote. He's casually telling you about what happens when you run into a crack bear. You should be able to shoot it, period. And you shouldn't have to pause or be afraid that you're going to get arrested, harassed, or pay fines. That's just crazy. So Jason Schoaf knows what's crazy. I mean, it would be crazy if the state fined you for shooting a crack bear. But of course, it's also crazy to think that there's crack bears. So I just don't know how to come down on this one. The Guardian was unable to find a documented incident of any of Florida's estimated population of 4,050 black bears having ingested crack. And Schoaf did not return a request for clarification because he was busy smoking crack. It's not written in here because they have a legal department at The Guardian, but you tell me what's going on. His colleagues, that is to say Schoaf's, not any bear, have appeared swayed by his argument, which is just so sad, really, for Florida. I mean, this is the sort of thing where everybody's supposed to roll their eyes and say, he got high, he saw a cocaine bear, he thought it was real. You know, we're not going to do this. But nope, they all got high and saw a cocaine bear, and now they're sure they have to do this. His colleagues appeared swayed by his argument and advanced the bill on party lines for a full House hearing. So, again, there's no difference between the parties, yargle bargle, etc., etc. I know there are some people out there who feel that way on certain issues, but there's a big difference. There's a yawning gulf between a giant, enormous chasm between the parties on the question of, are there crack bears knocking down doors and marauding in people's houses? There's a party that says yes, and there's a party that says no. But the party that says yes is actually the majority in the Florida State Legislature. So it's going on for a full House hearing. That is to say, not a hearing at all, but rather a debate on the House floor in an effort to actually adopt the legislation. I don't know if we should. Well, the writer of the article doesn't appear to be, let's say, similar. Well, doesn't have the same background in the legislative process that I do. That it's not to say that it isn't the correct one for Florida. I may be wrong. My experiences in the federal legislature. So, but normally it's not a hearing at that point. Anyway, a parallel bill in Florida's Republican-dominated Senate, of course, because it is Florida, is also making progress. That means there's two people in the Florida State Legislature willing to put their name to crack bear legislation. That increases the chances that permit requirements for killing bears under certain conditions may soon be dropped. Well, okay. I mean, the parallel bill in the Florida State Senate might be about, well, we should just make it legal to kill bears for any reason. It doesn't necessarily mean that they agree with Schoaf that they're on crack. But okay. So this may increase the chances that permit requirements for killing bears under certain conditions, crack included, may soon be dropped, along with an obligation that the state's Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission investigate all bear deaths. And why not? There's only 4,050 black bears. They're not going to have to investigate that many bear deaths. At least, and I think the investigate, this is an administrative burden for our Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. I don't think that the investigation into whether this bear was on crack is going to last very long. I think you could do 16, 17 of these investigations in a week. Easy. Was this bear on crack? Nope. Bears don't take crack, and they don't know how, and even if they ate it, it wouldn't really do any of these things. All right. Or did this bear, even more specifically, did this bear eat or smoke or whatever crack, break down this door, maraud its way through the house, stand up on its hind legs in the living room, wreck everything, and then get shot in justifiable self-defense by the homeowner? Well, where's the bear? It's in the forest. Okay, case closed. This bear was not shot in self-defense inside of the home of the alleged victim of the attack. Case closed. But what about the crack? Never mind. You know what? He ate all the crack in the world. He was still in the forest. If a bear eats all the crack in the forest and then marauds in a living room, I don't know. Okay, fine. Investigate it. That's really not a problem. But no, they're going to save us time and money. Yeah, it's just fiscally responsible. I'm tired of the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Service wasting taxpayer dollars on all these investigations. Stop the investigations. I think I could probably keep the costs on these investigations down myself. Thank you very much. Anyway, Schoaf arguing that his taking of bears bill, and he means it in the hunting sense, and I'm sure not the sexual sense, although there was another movie. Anyway, Schoaf arguing that his taking of bears bill is not about bears. I give up. I don't know. Should I just stop reading this? They're on crack. They're not on crack. They're marauding through. They're not marauding through houses. It's just not a real thing. My taking of bears bill is not about bears. What is it about? It's about taking and crack. It's about taking crack, obviously. Is that not what's happening here? Schoaf, arguing that his taking of bears bill, quote, is not about bears, said protections against animal cruelty and baiting would remain. Unless you're baiting the bears with crack, in which case the bear's in trouble, not you. He accused critics of fear-mongering, sure, why not, and insisted his target was nuisance bears. I can understand that. Increasingly encroaching on residential neighborhoods in search of food, posing an elevated risk to humans and pets. So where does the crack come in? Why are we not? I understand targeting nuisance bears. Crack is the problem here. It doesn't happen, and you look like an idiot. Can we clear that up? Because honestly, if we have to legislate what to do about shooting and killing, right? I don't want the guy who imagines bears on crack doing the legislating. You can vote on it, but I need somebody else to draft this thing. But opponents say the bill will allow people to kill bears even if no threat exists, then argue self-defense because they know FWC, Fish and Wildlife Conservation, would no longer have authority to investigate if you did that. So this is stand your ground against bears, but particularly crack bears. No word on how you do if you shoot a bear that has come into your living room, not high on crack, but let's say charged up about the virtues of socialism, having read Karl Marx. That is a bad shoot still, I think, unless that's included in, I don't know. But I think, really, honestly, you didn't need to do anything like this. If Fish and Wildlife finds the bear shot to death in your living room, and all indications after the investigation are that the bear the door is broken, things are wrecked, the PS2 is gone. I don't know. PS2. This is an old school bear. Whatever, all the honey is missing, right? And there's a bear carcass in the living room. My guess is most often Fish and Wildlife will clear you of any wrongdoing. You'll probably never face charges. if the bear's outside, if you've been baiting the bear, even if the bear, where the question would arise is the bear's in your garbage can. Did you bait it, or is it a nuisance bear? Then those are questions. If the bear's in your house, nobody's bothering you. Nobody's bothering you. It's fine. An online petition against the bill by the wildlife advocacy group One Protest, has amassed almost 20,000 signatures and takes aim at what it says are some of Schof's assertions. Who could imagine having a problem with some of his assertions? He says that under current law, you can't kill a bear in self-defense if the bear enters your home. That is untrue. I believe he may be right about this. That's Adam Sugalski, the group's executive director. And that's what he said in a message accompanying the petition. I would believe that at first blush. We already have a right to self-defense against any person or animal that we kill because we reasonably believe our lives or our loved ones, pets included, are in danger. His description of bears is, of course, grossly exaggerated. Bears are not the man-eating monsters he would like you to believe that they are. And even if they were, they just generally don't take crack and mostly don't come into houses. FWC figures would appear to back him up. What do you know? The commission recorded only 3 incidents of physical contact between black bears and humans in 2023, all in the northeast or north central area of Florida. And that's not even where most of the crack is. I don't know. Maybe that's true. While it is rare for bears to injure people in Florida, people have been bitten and scratched by bears defending themselves, cubs, or food sources, the commission said in online advice. None of this, by the way, includes Bear Country Jamboree in Disney World, which I don't think even exists anymore. I think they got rid of that one, probably because of the open reference to crack. Anyway, even though they are typically quiet and shy animals, they have the potential to seriously harm or kill people, especially when you give them your crack. Black bear sightings in the state are prevalent from beaches to downtown shopping areas. One was found last year roaming Florida's most popular tourist attraction, Disney's Magic Kingdom in Orlando, before being trapped and returned to the wild. And he was there clearly for Bear Country Jamboree. As I recall, though, I think there's some reference to the bears drinking alcohol. Didn't they have jugs of alcohol? Anyway, maybe not. I don't remember all that well. But they were country bears, and so, maybe. That was the stereotype then. The creatures, the FWC said, are generally quiet and prefer to avoid human encounters unless they need to buy crack, of course. No fatal bear attack on a human has ever been recorded in Florida. Time for a bill. In 2015, wildlife officials brought the state's controversial first black bear hunt in 20 years to a premature finish when almost 300 were killed in only 2 days. Despite his promotion of the bill, Schof maintained that he had nothing against black bears. I'm not prejudiced against black bears. I think you should love all bears, regardless of it's really more a content of their character thing than the color of their fur. We love bears. Bears are cute and cuddly and an amazing creature, he said. So, this is about the nuisance bear that has become conditioned to coming into people's homes. That is not a thing. You've heard it time and again that bears are shy and scared and they're timid. They stay away. That's true. Those aren't the bears we're talking about in this bill, which also isn't about bears anyway, and it has something to do with crack, and this guy is absolutely effing crazy. I did not intend to spend the amount of time that I spent on this, but honest to God, what are we going to do? There's no compromise with people like this. This is Jewish space laser, litter box in the elementary school classroom level thinking, and it's a real person with legislative authority and everything. And I guess even when push comes to shove, even on his own bill, he's telling us that the taking of bears bill has nothing to do with bears. I can't tell you what to do with people like this, but Donald Trump is their leader, and he thinks he's going to be able to take this 3-0 loss at the D.C. Circuit and turn it into standing 250 years of precedent on its head in order to save himself and allow himself to be established as dictator sometime in the next year or so. And you just better hope it doesn't happen. All right. The other things that I meant to tell you about were, let's see, we did get to the impeachment stunner, as The Hill puts it in their headline. How about I tell you a little bit about what happened in Nevada, just because it's procedural in nature and might be somewhat of interest. So we did find out, of course, that Nikki Haley lost to none of the above, essentially, in the Nevada primary. That you may have taken to mean, well, Donald Trump got, 80% of the vote, and none of the above got 5% of the vote, and Nikki Haley got 4%, or something like that. But that's not what happened, because Trump wasn't on the primary ballot. But that doesn't mean he's not going to win all the delegates from Nevada. He is. He's going to win them in the caucuses, which are on Thursday. So why do they have caucuses and a primary? And the answer is, I don't know, but maybe the Associated Press or Yahoo News does know. And so we'll share what they have to say about that. Nevada, Yahoo News says, is holding primaries and caucuses this week. Why Donald Trump and Nikki Haley won't be on the same ballot. When it comes to presidential nominating contests, some states have primaries, some have caucuses, and Nevada, weirdly, has both. Andrew Romano and John Ward will tell us about that for Yahoo News. When it comes to those, they repeat themselves. That was the subheader. Now it's the first line of the article itself, which I never really appreciate. Okay, so when it comes to presidential nominating contests, some states primaries, some states caucuses. This year Nevada has both, and neither of them should really affect the race for the Republican nomination. So why not have two? Why not have 15 different contests at that point? If that sounds confusing and self-defeating, that's because it is. There you go. On Tuesday, February 6th, the state of Nevada will be the one holding the primary for Republicans, and there will be only one major Republican candidate on the ballot, former United Nations ambassador and South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley. Then, 2 days later, on Thursday, February 8th, the Republican Party in Nevada, the party, not the state, will hold caucuses around the state where caucus goers will be able to vote for one of the other two remaining GOP candidates. One's Donald Trump, and the other one, this time, long-shot Texas businessman Ryan Binkley, whose name I don't believe I've ever heard before. But not for Haley. She won't be in the caucuses. What is going on here? Whoever wins the Nevada caucuses will add to their official delegate tally, moving one step closer to mathematically clinching the Republican nod. That person is almost certain to be Trump, but the caucus winner won't enjoy the kind of media attention and momentum boost that typically accrue to a victorious candidate, for the simple reason that he won't have defeated or even competed against his last major challenger. How did this happen? This is what I want to know. The mess in Nevada stems from a disagreement between state Republicans and Democrats, and who could believe that there would ever be such a thing? Caucuses are famous because of Iowa, okay, but they also place a much higher burden on voters. To participate, caucus goers have to show up at a certain time on a certain day, usually at night, and they have to remain at the caucus site for an extended period of time to hear speeches and go through the voting process and take crack and invade one another's homes. In contrast, a primary is just like a regular election, because it is one. Well, the polls are open throughout the day. Voters come and cast their ballots at their convenience, more or less. Then they leave. And many states now offer early voting, which further expands access. To open things up to as many people as possible, Democrats in the Nevada legislature passed a law in 2021 that moved the entire state from a caucus system to a primary system. The Democratic National Committee, which has been seeking to give more diverse states a bigger role in the party's nominating process, rewarded Nevada Democrats with the second slot on its 2024 primary calendar after South Carolina. That means Nevada will hold a normal Democratic primary on February 6th, and they did it, which President Biden is expected to win handily, and he did. Nevada Republicans, however, did not want to play along. after then-Governor Steve Sisolak, a Democrat, signed a slew of election-related bills into law when it created all-mail elections, M-A-I-L, in case you were wondering. Vote by mail, in other words. Another that expanded voter registration, the Nevada GOP, which of course hates expanding voter accessibility, filed a lawsuit in 2022 arguing that the state was infringing on its right to decide how to pick its own presidential nominee. A court eventually agreed that Nevada couldn't force the GOP to use its new primary system, but also warned that the GOP wouldn't be able to force Nevada to cancel its primaries. So, in the end, the Nevada Republican Party decided to drop its lawsuit and set up its own caucuses to choose delegates. I get it. Okay. Now, there's still the question as to why Haley and Trump aren't on the same ballot. I actually would like to hear that explanation, but I'm going to make you wait 2 minutes for it because it's time for a fake commercial break during which nothing in particular happens, but gives us a chance to catch your breath, get a sip of water. It's all very convenient.
Sup fam, it's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We got to get through the end of this article. I do want to find out exactly what the hell was going on in the minds of Nevada Republicans. Sort of, I don't know. And ordinarily not something I'd be terribly interested in, but it made a process question out of it, and so that put the interest back into trying to find out what was going on. So we know now why Republicans have both a primary happening and a caucus happening in their nominating contest in that state. They are more or less, I guess they ended up being mandated by the state to have a primary, but they were rankled by this whole thing of state mandating a primary. We want to be able to choose a nominee our own way. Okay. And we want that way to be inconvenient and annoying to the voters. All right. And we're going to sue you to allow us to do it the annoying way. And then I guess they found out you don't have to sue us in order to get the right to do the annoying thing. You can just go ahead and do the annoying thing and ignore the other thing. I mean, you still have to have the primary, but the state's paying for it, so it's no skin off your nose. And you can, if you want, tell people not to compete in the primary. If you really want that much attention for your stupid caucuses, you can do it however you want. And now, so there you have it. Now, why the Republican Party didn't say, oh, the state's going to pay the tab for this and we won't have to put money out or annoy our voters in order to pick who gets our delegates if we just accept the primary system. But because they have, opposition, defiance, disorder in the Republican Party, anything that's I'm not accepting, free stuff from the state. That's communism. I'll have my own goddamn thing that people hate and force them to do that instead, because that's totally not communism, as you know. Well, anyway, it isn't, but Doesn't matter. That's their vision of communism, and yet they impose it on themselves. So what about why they're not on the same ballot? And I guess we'll find out now, according to Yahoo News, why both Trump and Haley weren't both in the primary and the caucus. And the answer is, as part of its protest against the state-run primary system, the Nevada GOP declared that any candidate who put their name on the primary ballot would not be eligible to take part in its caucuses. So there. We stuck it to the man with that one, except it was actually the woman in this case, and also the man, not Trump, but the man, the state, that is, didn't really care. Oh, no, you're not going to do this. You're going to have a caucus. Boo-hoo, I'm so sad. No, stop. Don't stop. Come back. Anyway, given Trump's grip on the state GOP, he easily won the 2016 caucuses there, and his name has long adorned a Las Vegas hotel. Haley's campaign opted last October to forego the delegate hunt and, quote, compete in the primary instead. At the time, several other Republican candidates were set to appear on the primary ballot. All of them, including former Vice President Mike Pence and South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, have since exited the race. As a result, Haley could be announced, this is written before the actual results here, could be announced as the winner of the Nevada primary 2 days before Trump is announced as the winner of the Nevada caucuses, which actually come with the delegates. But he would get a headline, Haley wins Republican primary in Nevada, except as it turns out, she got the other headline. She got the Haley loses to none of the above in the primary. And I don't know whether they knew that that was going to be an option in the primary, but they should have thought about it. And once they saw that, they should have said, real chance that we might lose to none of the above, but I guess they didn't check on that. So as a result, Haley could, at that time, have been announced as the winner of the Nevada primary. Haley's only real competition in the primary is Nevada's none of these option, which is what the state's Republican governor, Joe Lombardo, says he'll choose before voting for Trump 2 days later in the caucuses. Republicans are allowed to participate in both events, which is remarkable, given that, remember, they're holding the caucuses as a protest against what they feel is state overreach in forcing them to have a primary. Then they're punishing any candidate who runs in the primary by saying you're not allowed to participate and run in the caucuses. But if you're a regular run-of-the-mill Republican voter in Nevada and you want to defy our protest, go ahead, because we're afraid to insult you because you're the ones that vote for us and put us in our job. So go ahead and waste your time if you want to, which is a fine approach to things. It's just inconsistent and weird. Because more people tend to participate in primaries than caucuses, it's possible that Haley will emerge from Nevada with more votes than Trump. That's not nothing, wrote Josh Putnam of frontloadinghq.com, a site that details the party nominating processes. But how much that particular something is worth is hard to gauge. It's not. It is nothing. It's zero. It's worth zero. It's not nothing, but it's worth zero. So it's nothing. So you're really wrong there, Josh. Okay. Well, anyway, it could, under other circumstances, have been something. If she had, gotten 75% of the vote, that would be something. But of course, if you lose to none of the above, then it is nothing. It is not hard to gauge. But remember, they asked Josh about this before that actually happened, in all fairness. However, if Trump supporters flood Tuesday's primary and follow Lombardo's lead, it's also possible that Haley will receive fewer votes than none of these. And that's what happened. The latest Yahoo News/YouGov poll shows Trump 79%, leading Haley 14% by 65 percentage points nationwide. Don't know what it looked like in Nevada, but I guess that's what actually happened. So that explains it. And that, I guess, probably also explains the willingness of the party to allow people to participate in both the caucuses and the primary. Go to the primary, embarrass whoever decided to participate in it, then come to the caucus and vote for the real guy. And they're just as happy knowing that most people probably won't actually come to the caucuses. That means less food and drink necessary to sustain them while they're there, fewer votes to count. Everybody gets to go home earlier, and that's just fine. Plus, they embarrass Nikki Haley on behalf of Donald Trump, and that's what it's all about. So now we understand it a lot better. I mean, we really do. I'm glad we figured that out. That tells us a lot about what's up in the Republican mind. Okay, lots of other stories to try to race through. Let's see what we can give you with at least headlines and a couple of paragraphs, if not dissections of the entire article. One, just to let you know that this is the case, Axios did in fact run with the headline that the House GOP wants another try on Mayorkas after the failed impeachment vote. Julie Grace Brufke has written this piece for them. It's bullet points so we can run through it quick. House Republicans are vowing to bring articles of impeachment back to the floor after a vote to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas narrowly failed on Tuesday. And I think I called him Anthony Mayorkas at some point earlier in the show. Sorry about that. Now, why it matters? Because impeaching cabinet secretaries is an important thing. But what else? GOP members are fuming after the vote went down, with some questioning why it was brought to the floor without the votes. House Republican Conference Vice Chair Blake Moore of Utah flipped his vote at the last minute, procedurally allowing leadership to bring it back up after it was clear they were short one vote. What procedurally allows it is just having somebody who was a no vote saying they want reconsideration. So you set that up by having somebody flip their vote for you. Multiple GOP sources said it was unclear whether Al Green would be present for the vote, causing some confusion with the whip count. But you can't, in a house where you have a 3-seat majority, 4-seat, 2-seat majority. You got to be precise with the whip count. You can't not know. Members said they expect House Majority Leader Steve Scalise, who has been recovering from cancer treatment, to be back in the coming weeks, which would improve their margins, maybe. What they're saying. Let's see. GOP members expressed disappointment and frustration with the vote failure, with some lashing out at the Republican no votes and leadership. Democrats hid one of their members, trying to throw us off on the numbers. Representative Murdery, Traitor, Idiot, Dummkopf Green alleged after the vote. The guy, worked hard and made it. Look, he's a member of Congress. You have to count on his showing up. It's an impeachment. He's going to show up. Nobody hid anybody. And even if they did, so what? This is how many Democrats there are in the House. Deal with it. Wouldn't need a statement if you'd just not vote with Democrats to save a Democrat. Representative Mike Collins, a Republican of Georgia, also like Murdery, Traitor, Idiot, tweeted, taking a shot at Representative Mike Gallagher of Wisconsin's statement on his no vote. Oh, well, you wouldn't have to tell us why you voted no if you didn't vote no. Well, thank you, Professor Genius. Okay. I would have thought they would have known the whip count. They're good on the other side at that. Is it that hard? Representative Ralph Norman told CNN. Well, you guys keep failing in all of these votes and you lose procedural votes all the time. Is it hard? No, it's counting. Are you doing it? Maybe not. I would have had the count right if I had counted Al Green. Well, there's the name. Count it. I don't know what to tell you about that, guys. They're just extraordinarily dumb and lazy, really. All right, let's see. Anything else I want to tell you about? Yes, absolutely, of course. Where to go with it? Well, we'll stick with the theme of court activity, and then we'll get to the failure of the wackadoodle convoy caravan perhaps another day if we can't get back around to it today. Let's see. A couple of things. Oh, yeah, I want to check in on this issue and see what Josh Friedman was tweeting about or skeeting about. Okay. Something to keep up with. In Trump's New York civil fraud trial, Judge Engeron, remember him? Yeah. Asks the parties to elaborate to the extent that they can on Alan Weisselberg's reported perjury in his courtroom, suggesting this might cast doubt on all his testimony. That's what perjury will do for you. Replies due tomorrow, that's now today, at 5 p.m. What's going on? Here's the memo. It's short. I can read it to you in its entirety so that we know what's going on. Again, Justice Engeron saying, counselors, dear counselors, as you are undoubtedly aware, in an article in the February 1st, 2024 online edition of the New York Times, headlined, Trump's former finance chief in negotiations to plead guilty to perjury, William K. Rashbaum, Jonah E. Bromwich, and Ben Protest. Look, he gives credit for the writing. That's nice. Usually, it's more than the New York Times often does. Well, they write that the defendant, Alan Weisselberg, quote, is negotiating a deal with Manhattan prosecutors that would require him to plead guilty to perjury, unquote. What's more, he, quote, would have to admit that he lied on the witness stand, unquote, in the case pending before me, and during a pre-trial interview plaintiff conducted. As the presiding magistrate, the trier of fact, and the judge of credibility, I, of course, want to know whether Mr. Weisselberg is now changing his tune and whether he's admitting that he lied under oath in my courtroom at this trial. Although the Times article focuses on the size of the Trump Tower penthouse, his testimony on other topics could also be called into question, because he's a perjurer, right? I also may use this as a basis to invoke falsus in uno. How do you like that? And do you want to know what that's about, by the way? I mean, it sounds like he's basically saying, well, if you have been found guilty of perjury, it probably means that we shouldn't be taking your testimony seriously on anything. Falsus in uno is short for falsus and uno, and I'm not certain of my Latin pronunciation. Falsus in uno, falsus in omnibus, which you might be able to piece together with a working knowledge of some basic Latin, right? A Latin maxim meaning false in one thing, false in everything. That, according to the Wikipedia entry on the subject, it is the legal principle that a witness who falsely testifies about one matter is not credible to testify about any matter. And I mean, that's basically Trump in a nutshell, but this is a story about Alan Weisselberg. So again, I may use this, Judge Ungren says, as a basis to invoke that maxim and legal precept. As the article notes, perjury, particularly in a high-profile trial, undermines the broader ends of justice and cannot be ignored. I do not want to ignore anything in a case of this magnitude. By Wednesday at 5 p.m., please submit as officers of the court a letter to me detailing anything you know about this that would not violate any of your professional ethics or obligations. I would also appreciate knowing how you think I should address this matter, if at all, including the timing of the final decision. Thank you, Justice Engeron. And I imagine the Trump side could take that invitation in the last paragraph there, if they were smart, which they are not, and say, I don't think you should address this matter at all. You're right. You should just ignore the whole thing and leave it be. And of course, I assume that the other side will say, nah, you should probably use it to discount the veracity of any testimony that Alan Weisselberg gave you and whatever else might be based upon it thereafter. So we'll see. That has to be done today. Just wanted to kind of keep you up to date with the fact that that happened. And then turn our attentions to other court happenings as well as things both inside and outside the court. Let's see. Why don't we try this one here first, which I thought was of some interest, over at the balloonjuice.com blog, longtime denizen of the blogosphere, written in this case by Water Girl, over one of the contributors over at Balloon Juice. Oh, and an open thread, but something that they gave you a topic to discuss. Hopefully, it says, this Hail Mary pass undercuts Trump's case. Which of Trump's case? Let's find out. It appears that Trump and his attorneys have outdone themselves with their latest submission to the Supreme Court. Here quoting the Twitter remarks of Judge Luttig, who we know about. Ordinarily, we'd read it really slowly, as is his speech pattern when he's really considering his words, but we want to get moving. Were I they, He's a very formal guy. I would not have made the revealing, fatuous, and politically and constitutionally cynical concluding argument that the former president and his lawyers made to the Supreme Court in their reply brief today. Which one are we talking about? I would consider this argument tantamount to an acknowledgement that the former president and his lawyers have all but concluded that their arguments have become so weakened by the briefing of respondents and their supporting amici that they believe that the Supreme Court is likely to hold the former president is disqualified under the 14th Amendment. That's the pleadings we're talking about for tomorrow's argument. But I guess, well, tomorrow's an oral argument. They submitted a written brief ahead of time, as is always the case. But apparently at least one of their arguments may end up shooting them in the foot. They believe, what else could possibly explain this 11th hour Hail Mary argument? Which one is it? The one that says, not even the Supreme Court of the United States can ever decide whether the former president is disqualified from the presidency. Not now, not ever. In hoc verba from petitioner's brief, taken directly from the brief, at the pages 22 and 23, the Trump argument says, Section 3 is a prohibition only on holding office. We've heard them advance this before. It was unbelievable when we heard them say it. But remember, their argument is, well, it just says that under the 14th Amendment, an insurrectionist cannot hold office. It doesn't say that they can't run for office. So you need to let me run for office. And then if I win, if you want to interpret the 14th Amendment as disqualify me at that point. But it doesn't say I can't run. It just says I can't hold the office, which of course is a formula for saying, well, I won the election or somehow cheated to make it look like I won the election, whatever, or dispensed with elections entirely and seized power. And the court says I can't, so my supporters should go out in the street and riot. That's essentially what they're looking for with this one. So Section 3 is a prohibition only on holding office, and Congress can waive this prohibition between now and the end of the next presidential term, anytime up to the end of the term I'm running for, 2029. So no court or litigant can declare that President Trump is presently disqualified from holding office without assuming or predicting that Congress will refuse to lift any Section 3 disability that might apply. In other words, it's Trump's argument that, one, it's only a prohibition against holding office, not running for office, so you'd allow me to run. And then if I win, you should make me president and then ask the Congress, well, do you want to disqualify him or not? And if they don't disqualify me, and they have all the way until January 20th at 11:59 a.m. in the year 2029 to decide that question. And if they don't, then, I don't know, something, and I'm not disqualified. I mean, it's a bizarre argument to begin with. But anyway, continuing here, neither the Colorado Supreme Court nor this court, the Supreme Court, can declare, says Trump's brief, a candidate ineligible for the presidency now based on a prediction of what Congress may or may not do in the future, nor can a court deprive a presidential candidate of the opportunity to petition Congress for a waiver, especially when Congress is mostly likely to grant a waiver after the candidate has been elected, and its members will face political pressures to respect the will of the voters and allow the president-elect to take office. That's the argument. Lawrence Tribe, it is pointed out here in this embedded tweet, agrees. I agree with Judge Ludwig here. The argument is that it's always too soon to enforce the 14th Amendment's disqualification safeguard until it's, of course, too late. And that's an insult to all 9 justices and to the law itself. Will these 6 radical justices on the Supreme Court humiliate themselves? Whatever happened to states' rights? Well, it seems like just yesterday, because it was, that states' rights were so very important. Only time will tell, Water Girl concludes here. That's part of what the exciting arguments will be about tomorrow as the Trump team tries to convince them that the 14th Amendment's prohibition Section 3 is not only a nullity because it doesn't apply or it doesn't apply to the president or it was only meant to apply to the Civil War, but on top of that, even if it all still applies, you can't apply it to me because I'm not holding office. I'm merely running for office, and I may run for office and maybe I'll win, and then at that point I could be ineligible, but maybe the Congress will decide to dismiss the ineligibility, and they have the entirety of my term in office to do that, so you can't tell. And, of course, that's a total dismissal of the self-executing nature of Section 3, but they are hoping that they will ignore that part. All right, let's see. I guess other things that we might want to include in our courtroom activity roundup. Let's go back to Philip Bump, because, again, it's always fun to do that because, well, he confirms priors, but he's doing it with such aplomb and style. Right here in the Washington Post, as Trump's immunity claim was shot down, his Senate allies caught flack. And that's always good news. Let's see what he means by that. Legal argumentation naturally adopts a veneer of seriousness, regardless of how unserious the issues under consideration might be. Crack bears, litter boxes, etc. Those weren't the subject of litigation yet, but legislation bears a close resemblance. It, too, adopts a veneer of seriousness, or used to, until recently, when we started electing YouTubers widely in this country. The claim for former President Donald Trump's legal team that he should be offered blanket immunity against federal charges brought by special counsel Jack Smith was not generally viewed as particularly serious. Instead, it was often seen simply as a way to delay the criminal trial ahead of the presidential election. Should Trump win that election, after all, the legal issue goes away, pardons himself, etc., or orders the Justice Department not to investigate him, but to investigate everybody else. Anyway, the arguments used to bolster the immunity claim that, for example, his impeachment in the wake of the Capitol riot in 2021 meant that further prosecutions posed a double jeopardy threat, similarly prompted eye-rolling among experts. By the way, applicability for that argument now. I just told you a few minutes ago that the House intends to bring the Mayorkas impeachment back to the floor, which, of course, you know, according to the former president of the United States, no less an authority than that, is, in fact, double jeopardy. Of course, it's not double jeopardy for the same reason that it's not double jeopardy for him, but if he still claims to believe that it's double jeopardy, why isn't Trump racing to the microphone saying, just to prove my point, I could do this all day long, and I could do this for Democrats or Republicans, but just to show you that my heart's in the right place. I believe that trying to impeach Mayorkas twice, he would say, like I did, Anthony Mayorkas, which is not his name, but trying to impeach him twice, why, that's double jeopardy. That just goes to show how fair I really am. And they should now allow me not to be tried on these charges because of double jeopardy, except whatever. It doesn't really work that way. Anyhow, the D.C. Circuit Court still needed to consider and parse those arguments, as stupid as they were, I would add, offering a detailed rebuttal to what Trump's attorneys and allies had put forward. And remember, it took a little longer than even we wanted it to. It was carefully reasoned, and we're all glad about that, and that might help short circuit the process by precluding en banc rehearing and certiorari at SCOTUS. But of course, we have to go through those arguments and see those things rejected too. And that's part of the time-wasting strategy. Anyway, in its ruling on the question made public Tuesday morning, the court dismissed the idea that Trump's impeachment was an obstruction to his criminal prosecution. In doing so, it also undercuts a common refrain about the impeachment from Trump and dinged some of the senators who rose to Trump's defense. Trump's attorneys had tried to block the D.C. prosecution by noting that his impeachment in the House after the January 6th riots had been followed by a Senate trial that culminated in acquittal. The Fifth Amendment protects people from being tried twice for the same crime, so, they argued, the former president couldn't be criminally charged by the special counsel. The court's rejection of this argument was direct. One, an impeachment does not result in criminal punishments. And two, the indictment does not charge the same offense as the single count in the impeachment resolution. Impeachment the ruling states, is a political process that is instigated and overseen by Congress. This is true, and something that Trump has at times tried to gloss over. He likes to suggest that the impeachments he faced were solely a function of Democratic political action, as opposed to also being rooted in the actual wrongdoing on his part. But then to treat his two acquittals as apolitical exonerations of his actions. They were not. The ruling pointed this out. As a result of the political nature of impeachment proceedings, impeachment acquittals are often unrelated to factual innocence, the court wrote. Former President Trump's acquittal in his impeachment trial on the charge of inciting insurrection makes this point. The 43 senators who voted to acquit him relied on a variety of concerns, many of which had nothing to do with whether he committed the charged offense, it said. The ruling walks through the hodgepodge of reasons offered by the senators. Some were procedural, like with Todd Young's complaint that the House rushed the impeachment. Some were political, such as Ron Johnson's disparagement of the impeachment as vindictive and divisive. 30 senators, the ruling noted, had objected to the impeachment because by the time the trial was conducted, Trump wasn't president anymore, what the court dubbed jurisdictional objections. Those same senators, and it's time to get out of here, of course, including Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, got another call out in the ruling. This was the point of the whole thing. Trump's attorneys had argued that Trump couldn't be criminally charged unless he had been first impeached and convicted. And if that were the case, the court wrote, and if those senators' jurisdictional concerns were valid reasons not to convict, it would mean that no former president could ever be convicted of a crime committed in office. If you have to impeach before indicting, and you can't impeach someone who's out of office, that's that. Exoneration ad absurdum. That impeachment is not a criminal process and cannot result in criminal punishment by itself suggested that the Fifth Amendment's protection against double jeopardy didn't apply. Trump does not seriously contend otherwise, the ruling continues, and he doesn't explain why he believes that impeachment can implicate double jeopardy principles when it does not involve criminal punishment. Those scare quotes, double jeopardy principles, might justifiably be viewed as judicial eye-rolling. There's no mystery about why Republican senators declined to convict Trump during the impeachment trial in February of 21. Even by then, it was clear to Hill Republicans that their base was sticking with Trump, meaning that there was a political cost to be paid in trying to hold him to account. Some voted to convict Trump anyway, earning wrath from Trump and the base. And then, trying to block his criminal indictment, Trump tried to use those senators as a shield a second time.
From networksradio.com.
It didn't work.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
We'll sneak this in. His attorneys argued that the senators' decisions were so weighted with importance that they were the equivalent of the judgment of a jury. So the court had little choice but to point out, no, they weren't. They were just politicians doing politics. For more on politicians doing politics, stay tuned for Justice Putnam next on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy.